Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the PowerTalk Show powered by Business Talks Weekly. Our guest today is an information designer turning data into visual for his clients. He is also a LinkedIn learning instructor. Please welcome author Bill Shander. Bill, welcome to the PowerTalk Show.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Thank you so much. Bill, before we dive into the conversation, can you tell us a bit about your professional background and what led to the creation of Beehive Media?
Sure. So I usually start the story going all the way back. So I graduated college and I skied for 2 years. I just had fun and was a ski bum. But during that time, I became a journalist. I was working at a radio station in the ski town where I was living. And then I decided to go to grad school for journalism, got a master's in journalism, and I had one job as a journalist and I hated it. So I left the job and I started my company. So that was a little over 30 years ago. And the company at the time was doing pretty quickly after I founded it was doing web design and development. And so, this was like in the mid 90s, mid to late 1990s. The web was growing and people needed their websites created. So I started doing that, but I always had clients who had data. So a lot of consulting firms or university research, et cetera, and they really wanted the data to be an important part of their website. So I was doing data visualization all along the way. And about 10 years ago, I realized that was the fun part. Doing web design and development wasn't so fun anymore. And so that's when I focused exclusively on information design, data visualization, data storytelling. So communicating with data. And that coincided with when I got invited to do my first course for what became LinkedIn Learning. And now I have done 10 or 15 courses for LinkedIn. I teach workshops for clients around the world, including in Dubai. I was there last December teaching a couple workshops, Dubai and Abu Dhabi. I get to travel around the world and share what I've learned over the years. It's really great. I've really enjoyed the path. It's been a very strange path because I never would have imagined that I'd be doing what I do for a living today. My career happened to me is what I usually say. Yeah. So, AI can obviously create visuals out of data, and the different tools are different and better at different parts of it. I have not played around with AI directly too much. I've been watching some other people do some experimentation, specifically with visualization. All I can say is this, that, the tools, just like any tool, can execute on a visual well, and obviously very quickly. The problem is, of course, that why are we visualizing data? What is the data actually saying? And AI doesn't know that. AI doesn't know what the person who was going to read that visual needs from it. And so AI is only as good as the prompt. It's only as good as what you ask it to do. But of course, AI will do a very sufficient job at creating a visual. The storytelling, actually making sure that the visual says what needs to be heard from the audience, that's where the human obviously is going to add a lot of value. And I don't think that's ever going to go away. In fact, I wrote a book this year, which I forgot to even mention so far, called Stakeholder Whispering. And that the entire idea of that book is that our stakeholders don't know what they need. And our job is to help them figure it out and then do that for them. And so, in my world of data, your boss says, make me a dashboard, so you make a dashboard. Or eventually the boss is going to ask AI, make me a dashboard, and it's going to make a dashboard. What do you really need in that dashboard? What are you trying to accomplish? What decisions do you need to make? And unless the human in the loop really understands the underlying needs of the stakeholder, and again, the stakeholder themselves often don't know what they need themselves. It takes a human conversation to really figure that out. And so the AI can take us so far, and the AI is a great enabling tool, but it can't do it on its own.
That's very interesting, Bill. So, can you tell us few points where do stakeholders miss and what kind of representations are they not able to find in the data?
Basically, we're all being driven by our subconscious at all times. And so it's not that they always don't know what they need. It's just that very frequently our stakeholders ask us to do things because that's how it's always done, or that's how they saw their competitor doing it, or that's how they used to do it a long time ago. And so it's like a gut reaction. It's a quick response. So in other words, I have data, make me a dashboard. Maybe you don't need a dashboard. Why? What makes you say you need a dashboard? Well, I need to be able to make decisions about this. Okay. Is it one decision a year or is it 47 decisions a week? If it's 47 decisions a week, yeah, you probably need a dashboard. You need a tool you can access all the time with updated live data. If it's a once a year thing, maybe you just need a presentation, or maybe you just need literally one number. And so, our stakeholders are being driven by their subconscious, and our job is to help ask them good questions to figure out what they really need from us. And, it's the subconscious driving the bus is a big part of the problem. And the other part of the issue is that, our stakeholders, like all humans, we're flawed, and we're essentially we're driven by all kinds of subconscious biases, and so, limitations of our own brains, essentially, whereby if we if we really pause and slow down and think strategically, we can sometimes get close to figuring out what we need. But even then, as we know from psychology, we're not even that good at that, human beings. We think we're very good at reasoning, but we're actually not. And so, the best way to really get to understanding these kinds of things is a really good strategic conversation with a partner who can sort of ask good questions and get you thinking differently to get you to really figure out what you actually need. That is like a highly contextual question, meaning this business owner over here needs to be looking at one metric. This business over here needs to be looking at a different metric. It's based on your industry. It's based on your role. It's based on the nature of your business. It's based on the stage of your business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One of my LinkedIn learning courses is called Building KPIs to develop. I can't remember the name of it. It's about creating KPIs, and it's exactly that question. And the answer really is it depends. I mean, so in my personal business, I do workshops. Clients hire me to teach them how to do data communications. And so the metrics I really care about is how many people are calling me to reach out to me, because after a certain number of phone calls, I know that people are going to hire me. For someone who's manufacturing automobiles, it's a completely different set of metrics. So it's incredibly dependent on all those things I mentioned. So the advice I would give a business owner is ask yourself, by the way, is it about sales? Is it about HR issues like recruiting and hiring? Is it about managing your finances? First of all, narrow down to like which thing you're trying to work on, because there's no magic metric. They're individual pieces of metrics. And then think about what really, really, really drives your success in sales or recruiting or whatever it is you're measuring. And it's usually not like one simple number, like, for better sales, I need more people looking at my website, or more people, scanning a QR code. It's usually more nuanced than that. So kind of like our stakeholders know what they need, business owners, when they're setting metrics, don't really think deeply enough about it. So go a level deeper beyond that top line number that you think is the most important one to measure. It may be this number divided by some other numbers. So dig a little bit deeper. And my course on LinkedIn Learning, if you have access to it, is a pretty good reference for how to think about that strategically. Yeah, it's a great question. And, obviously AI is generating an insane amount of content in learning and beyond. AI can do a really good job at generating content that makes sense. So like if I need to learn how to use a tool, an AI generated course about how to do X, Y, and Z in a tool, it's probably going to be pretty decent at that. Where I think AI will probably not be as productive is going to be at really thinking strategically about business issues, as an example. So I think that, as far as the learning industry goes, there will be a place for AI driven content, and there's going to be a place for human created content. And there's always going to be a place for humans in that loop, because only the humans can understand, once again, what does the learner really need from me right now? Does the learner, in fact, when I teach data visualization, oftentimes people will call me and they want me to hire me to do a workshop for them. And they'll say, oh, can you come in and teach our team how to use Power BI, which is, a tool for doing data visualization. And I'll ask them, 5, 10 questions. And by the end of the conversation, almost inevitably, they don't really need to learn Power BI. They need to learn to understand how to communicate with data first. AI driven content for some things, human driven content for other things, but the human to really figure out what the learners need is always going to be required.
Interesting point of view. Bill, when it comes to your entrepreneurial journey as a founder, what sort of challenges you faced in growing your company?
I mean, the very first challenge was my first 6 months in business. I didn't get a single check, didn't have a single client, nothing happened. So, getting ramped up to where I could really support myself took time. One of the most important lessons I learned then, and over the years, probably about 2 or 3 other times when I had projects that either were enormous projects and they didn't go well, or the client took forever to pay, etc., I learned the importance of cash management. I don't care how much money you raise. I don't care how good your clients are. I don't care how big your business is, how well it's growing. The most important thing you need to do is every month you got to make payroll and you got to pay your bills. And that requires being very aware of how much cash you have in the bank at all times. Now, you have different strategies about what to do about that. Maybe you can borrow some money. You can get new investors. You can use factoring and other tools. But whatever it is, come the end of the month, you got to pay your bills. And so probably the most important thing I did over the years was keep a very close eye on cash. And everything else was sort of not secondary to that, but nothing else can happen unless you have the cash in the bank to run your business. People talk about runway. Now, runway is what it's all about. So keep a close eye on your cash is one piece of advice.
Absolutely. Cash is king. And as you mentioned, you got to pay the bills. Bill, what,
Yeah.
what inspired you to put your thoughts together and become an author and write Stakeholder Whispering?
So, because I do courses on LinkedIn, I'm very lucky in that I usually get approached by publishers fairly frequently to write a book. And usually they're asking me to write a book about data visualization. And I really didn't want to do that because there are a lot of really good data visualization books. I have a whole bunch of them up on my shelves here. But I got contacted by Wiley about a year and a half ago. And this idea of stakeholder whispering had just popped into my head because, I've been for 30 years, I've known my clients often don't know what they really need. And my best clients come to me because I'm good at helping them figure it out. And they value that. And so I knew that that was something important. And on top of that, I started looking around and no one talks about it. No one, and especially nobody talks about how to do it. People say, oh, to figure out what your clients need, you got to ask them. Yeah, but how do I ask them? What does that conversation really look like? And so, the book, I was just inspired to write about the topic because it seems so important and so not at all talked about. And by the way, it's not just for people like me, information designers, even design generally. It's for any knowledge worker. I don't care if you're in IT, finance, HR, whatever you do, your boss, your client doesn't know what they need from you when they ask you to do something, or it's directionally accurate. So the best among us always do a good job of helping them figure it out. And so the book was actually very easy to write because I was so inspired to do it. And so that's how I knew I was really onto something.
Very interesting. Bill, what are you looking at? Like, what is your vision for the next 3-5 years? Where are you heading?
So, I love sharing what I've learned. This is why I wrote the book. This is why I do the courses and the workshops. I do almost no project work anymore. I love teaching. I love public speaking. And I'm just looking to do more and more of that. So, I'm doing a lot of podcast interviews that are about the book and about what I do for a living. And I'm just going to keep working on those things. And, I may have another book in me. We'll see. I haven't thought of the topic yet, but it's definitely something I'm thinking about.
That's very interesting and good luck with that. Are you,
Thank you.
in the future planning to build in a course or an LMS system where people come subscribe to your courses?
I have thought about it. And for now, I'm not planning on doing that. We'll see. It's one of those things where LinkedIn has been a very good platform for me, but having all your eggs in one basket as a business person, as an entrepreneur, diversify is another good piece of advice. Always look for different ways that you can make money and do what you need to do and don't rely on others. So it's a good thing to do. And I know other people who have done it. It's something I've considered, but I haven't really pulled the trigger on it yet.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bill, what piece of advice that you got change your perspective professionally and personally?
I don't know if I have any one single piece of advice, but I will say this. When I first started my company, over the first 3 to 5 years, I merged with another company, then separated from that company, sort of worked almost exclusively with another company. So it was almost like a merger and then separated again, et cetera. And those two experiences specifically, I had a senior partner or the client at the second example who were a little bit older, a little bit more experienced, really great mentors. And I learned so much from watching them. I learned what not to do in some cases. I saw some terrible things that I knew was that they're destroying this opportunity. Don't do it that way ever again. But I mostly learned things like pricing. As a young person selling my services, I was pricing myself way too low. And so I learned things like, price yourself to the value that you bring to the table. I learned a lot about how to have productive conversations that develop relationships with clients rather than transactional relationships. So many things. And so, yeah, not really advice, but just the overall experience of having those two mentors really made me who I am today, even though that was, 25, 30 years ago.
Thank you so much, Bill. Thank you so much for coming to our podcast and giving your time to us. It was a wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I had a good time.